Welcome to Renegade Thinkers Unite, a show that will help you transform your marketing from mere messaging to programs that break the rules and make a difference. Join the movement today and learn non-traditional techniques that give you an edge. Now, here's your Chief Marketing Renegade, Drew Nizer.
We've talked to a lot of fintech people and marketing technology people, but we've avoided the health tech section. And this is a growing area where technology providers are helping all sorts of aspects of healthcare. And one of the reasons that I have personally not gone after this area is I had a supposition that there wasn't a lot of risk taking. There wasn't a lot of courageous marketers in this space because I felt that risk was a dirty word in the healthcare sector, given the uncertainties in the space. And it's difficult to make sense of all the options. And it's really important because, health is pretty fundamental to us. So whether we're talking about benefit providers themselves, employees, employers, or end users. So the good news is my guest today is Burt Rosen, who is the Chief Marketing Officer of HealthSparq, a health tech solutions provider that helps people tackle that imposing concept of risk by making smart choices about their healthcare options. So welcome to Renegade Thinkers Unite, Burt.
Thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be here and love having conversations about taking risk in healthcare.
And that's, which is amazing. And I talked about that concept of risk in the healthcare space, and you've really embraced risk and which is amazing, coming into healthcare as a CMO without having any previous background in healthcare. So tell us a little more about how someone with a background in early childhood education and hospitality ends up winding up as a CMO in the health tech section.
Okay, let's see. So for starters, I'm a person who always likes to learn. So, my background, I've jumped around a lot. I've been in television for 12 years back in the 80s and 90s. Went to digital agencies for 6, then went to hospitality, early childhood education, and then saw an opportunity to work for a company that was in a very early marketplace, which was really around how do we help people make better decisions for their own healthcare and largely around cost. So, I'll give you an example, right? You need an MRI or a colonoscopy, and the price variation of those treatments are huge. And you could go 2 blocks and save $1,000, but nobody even knows that. So what our tools did was start to expose those cost variations and help people make decisions that were better for them, especially in the high deductible plan world where they're paying a lot more out of pocket. So that's kind of what attracted me. And I'm always attracted to Wild West types of opportunities, which is why I went to digital agencies in the 90s. And just to answer your question, so I've been in healthcare roughly 3.5 years, and I'm a brand marketer by background and a digital marketer by background. And I got here and honest to God, I was like, holy crap, like could there be an industry that understands how to focus on a person less than healthcare? So for someone with my background, the opportunity to come in and with a bar that was extremely low and just try things that were different for the industry. I mean, I couldn't pass that opportunity up. And I tell a lot of people, and I probably have to be careful when I say this out loud, but in a lot of ways, I hate this industry, right? Like no one likes healthcare. Nobody likes having to go through it. By the time you need it, the last thing you want to deal with is the overly complex healthcare system that we live in. And I've kind of used that passion to fuel my desire to try to make changes and be disruptive in some ways. So.
Okay. And we're going to get to a lot of that, but there are a couple things that you said that I think are really interesting. And so one of them is it's that you're sort of a lifetime learner and you like to get to challenges. And I think I've noticed this as a characteristic in CMOs who started on the agency side. And I just wanted to point that out for those of you thinking about career paths and so forth. Because as agency professionals, we become really good at learning new industries. And it's funny because, as a CMO, the minute they get to the CMO, they think, well, I want an agency that has experience in this category. And yet we know, which is ironic, right? But we know as agency guys, we learn this stuff. We learn a new category all the time. So there's just this funny, myopia that exists. And so you're living proof that, you can learn a new industry if you understand the fundamentals of marketing.
Drew, it's a great point. And I'll actually tell you probably the reason why I'm like this now is because when I got out of college, all I wanted to do was work in sports marketing. And I tried. I like cold called every marketing person at every sports team, every league. And I lived in New York City, so the access was fairly good. You couldn't find one place that would hire you if you didn't have sports marketing background. And it made no sense to me, right? Like I have no background and I'm trying to get into sports marketing, but that kind of fueled me. And I'll tell you now, despite the chagrin of a lot of people, I can't say unequivocally, but for the most part, I won't hire an agency that specializes in healthcare. Because
that's hilarious.
Because when you look at healthcare, right, like healthcare is in the mess that healthcare is in because of all the people who have always been in it. So if we don't bring some fresh perspectives into the industry, nothing's going to change and nothing's going to get better. So really, like, unless I need something really like a real technical white paper or product thing written, like my PR agency, the one I use right now, has very little healthcare experience. And I got pitched by a lot who did, but you're an agency understanding inside and out regulations for me wasn't important. An agency understanding what niche we could fill and how we could do some real breakthrough stuff was much more important.
That's, I know I have agency listeners, and I think that gives us all heart. And it also makes me think that as we focus for Renegade, thinking of ex-agency people who are CMOs are a good target for us because those folks will understand that, you can learn these industries and you get stuck if you've been in the same industry doing it the same way for all these clients.
Absolutely.
So,
and let me just add one other quick thought, but I would say, working at an agency, you really hone your creativity and your ability to think creatively. And I don't mean design, right? I mean, I think how to solve business problems, how to do all those things because you're constantly in pitch mode. So you're not going to be providing value unless you're coming up with ways to solve people's problems. And that education and experience is so valuable when you walk into a client organization that's going to tend to be more political, more bureaucratic. So you're not, it's at least in my experience, I've seen a few companies that are a little bit different, but it's rare that someone's going to walk into a client organization and break out creatively. So that's the other advantage I think people have coming from agencies is you have to, as you said, you have to learn many industries, often at the exact same time. You have to switch hats every 5 minutes. And you could be working on anything from a complex intranet redesign all the way through a sophisticated acquisition marketing program, all the way through, a big breakthrough PR event. And that's just exposure that you get at an agency that you don't get at a client. So just another quick thought.
And it's funny, there's one other thing I'm thinking about in your background that I think makes a lot of sense and sets you up for success. And this had happened in an earlier conversation I had with a CMO, a recruiter at Aegon Zender, and she just talked about how CMOs need, the ideal one has that sort of deep digital understanding and, the deep sort of marketing package goods, sort of classic strategy understanding. And so, you were able to get both. So let's talk about, all right, so we got these, you have some great experience. Let's talk about a specific sort of, if you will, fresh take that you brought, in terms of, taking a risk and in changing sort of the model of marketing in your world.
Sure. I can give it to you, and tell me what you'd prefer. I could give it to you at the brand level or at a program level.
Let's start at the brand level.
Okay. So, there's always like a level of arrogance in CMOs, right? Because we all start a new job and the first thing we all do is rebrand the company.
Yeah. What's up with that, by the way? I mean, come on. Not everybody before you could have been that dumb. Why is it that every CMO needs to rebrand?
Yeah, but be careful asking that from an agency, right? You want every CMO to rebrand.
No, sometimes I do, but only if
kidding.
Not always. Sometimes there's some really good stuff in there that they just walk away from.
Yeah, I'll tell you. So with me, when I got to HealthSparq, healthcare has no idea how to talk to people. And I come out of a background where I know how to talk to people because of consumer brand, and acquisition stuff and a lot of digital stuff for hotels and for childcare and, a lot of those things. And I got here and I'll never forget, like the first day I got here, I walked in and I started to look at some of the collateral that existed. And we had one piece that it was an image of a cloudy sky with two arms, like in a yellow rain slicker, holding up an iPad that had sunshine in it. And then I opened the piece of collateral and I swear it was product barf, right? Like it had no idea what you were talking to people about or why you were talking to people about it. It was more like, let's barf everything we do onto a piece of collateral. And I saw that, and then I started to look around our industry more, and I saw that there were people in my space who were positioning themselves like the enterprise health cloud, right? And things like that. And one of the things that I always focus on in healthcare is, despite the fact that I work in the industry, I'm a complete consumer of healthcare, right? So I hate it as much as somebody who doesn't work in the industry. And what I learned quickly was that the industry, I mean, it's a huge echo chamber in healthcare, and the industry focuses so much on itself, it never actually thinks about the impact it makes on people. So I started to do, and I did some research, and I did, we actually asked we did a big survey for all the employees, and we spoke to a lot of our clients and a lot of other research. We actually found a niche in our industry, which again is a little sad when you think about it, because other industries have figured this out years ago, but the niche was really around, let's not talk about the tool that we offer. Let's talk about the impact that the tool we offer makes on a person at the end of it. And we shifted the whole brand around it. So our mission statement became helping people make smarter healthcare choices. And we really focused on the people part of it. I'll give you a quick example.
Well, hang on a second. We got it, because we got to take a break.
Okay.
But there were one of the terms that you use, product barf, is now just like lasered into my mind. I feel like it's etched there and I can't get it out. But I'm going to give all the listeners a chance to get that out of their heads for a second, and we'll be right back.
You've been listening to another great interview on Renegade Thinkers Unite with Drew Nizer. But the value doesn't end there. As a listener, you can download a free ebook from Drew, Renegade Thinkers, interviews with 11 trailblazing CMOs any business can learn from. Top marketing thought leaders and proven executives from Time Warner, American Express, and Chico's, and others. Get your free copy at renegadethinkersunite.com/ebook. For listeners only at renegadethinkersunite.com/ebook.
Okay, we're back, and my guest is Burt Rosen, who is the CMO of HealthSparq, a health technology company. And he just introduced the idea of product barf, which I'm still trying to get over. But you did mention a couple of things, and you sort of said it quite casually, but I'm just going to put a punctuation point. You just said we did some research. And I was like, yes, you did. And that's so important, but a lot of people forget that step. So you talked to your consumers, you talked to your customers, and you decided that people didn't need a shovel, they needed a hole. So you focused on the benefit of the product, and that was allowing them to make smarter choices. Okay, so we have this positioning, which makes a lot of sense. Then I would imagine, because we're not talking about the product anymore, we're talking about the benefit, you needed to find some interesting ways to bring that to market.
Yeah. So, and actually, I don't think I've used the term product barf before, but now I'm probably going to use it a lot. I'm also going to use you didn't need the shovel, you needed the hole, because that's also great. Okay. So I'll give you a quick example. So when I started, we would go, there's a healthcare conference every day of the week, pretty much, and usually multiple conferences that day. So we would go out and we would pitch healthcare conferences, and we would get some speaking opportunities because we were very early in the industry. So people were fascinated by what we were doing. And pretty early on, I saw that more and more people got familiar with what we were doing and what our segment is called transparency, but what transparency actually looked like in healthcare. So we did the brand work, and we came out with helping people make smarter healthcare choices. And I stopped booking speaking spots for us where we would get up and talk about transparency. And what I did instead was I said, we have a speaking slot in front of a room full of health plan people, normally at health plan conferences, because that's our target audience. Why don't we recruit a panel of normal human beings, quote, off the street, not literally homeless people, but quote, off the street, and have them come in and sit on a panel and talk about their healthcare experiences in front of these people from health plans. And again, back to my comment before, in any industry in the world, that's a fairly normal practice. I pitched it to the biggest association that we have in the health plan world, and the response was, that's the most innovative idea we've ever heard.
Wow. See, don't you love that? That's amazing. It's
like I said, the bar's low.
Well, that's awesome. But so I think I found an oxymoron to add to my list in the marketing world. Healthcare transparency. Come on.
You're right.
Right? That is
point.
Just a fundamental. I just think about some of the personal experiences that I've had where, the colonoscopy and then the bill arrives and it's like, right. Whoa, you didn't submit it you didn't even call the insurance company. That's standard procedure. And then boom. Anyway, so you have this innovative panel. that does that.
Can we put innovative in air quotes?
Yes. I mean, innovative for the industry, and that's all that matters. I mean, and the part of the Renegade Thinkers Unite is, and the reason why I do interview different categories is something that it's very hard to be innovative in, say, soft drinks where they're spending, they're basically selling sugar and water and they have 90% of their dollars available for marketing and they're doing really amazing things. But, in your industry, there's fear, of doing interesting things. And then there's just, it's like a gap somehow. The people that are attracted to the industry just sort of bring let's do what everybody else is doing mentality. So we have this panel. You have real people on the stage. Then what happens?
So then what happens? So we have them come in and we say, and we're not saying, tell me about your experience using your health plans portal and what did you, like, it's not that. It's like we ask very broad general questions. So tell me about your healthcare experience in one word. And you'd go down the panel and you'd get somebody who says great. You get most people who say confusing, complex, sucks, right? You get most of that. And then we'd talk about, okay, can you elaborate a little bit on why? And when we do it, like, my goal is to get the conversation starting, but then I want as many people in the room to ask questions, right? Because it's more valuable for them to ask their questions. And we've probably done it 7 or 8 times. And the last time we put a little bit of a twist on it in that we actually recruited only millennials. So I joke a lot about how in healthcare, you talk to a healthcare company about marketing to consumers and they think consumers live on some small island in the South Pacific that's only reachable by boat, right? Like they think it's this segment of people that they don't know what to do with or how to get a hold of. And then you add on top of that millennials, and it's like they're on a dinghy 100 miles from the island. Right?
Yeah,
like it freaks everybody out. So we did the last consumer panel we did was just with millennials. And we've created a bunch. I mean, just from a tactical standpoint, it's great because not only did we do the panel, but then we have blog articles and LinkedIn articles and all the stuff that we used in social media to promote the hell out of it. But we've done it 8 times and after the first time we did it, so I'll never forget this, it probably went an hour and a half. It went really long. Here, I'll give you a quick funny story and then I'll tell you where I was.
All right. Let me just pause you for 1 second and just sort of say the way I see this is, which is so interesting. It's like a public focus group. Most of the time marketers would do this behind the counter, the scene and a moderator would do it. And here you are publicly sort of getting real people to talk about their issues. And I imagine I could just see this audience scribbling down notes. Oh my gosh. So just alone, and so somebody used the expression at an event today. It was like the pink tiger at the zoo. But I think that's sort of that the millennials represent this sort of crazy, for a lot of folks, this notion of we don't know these people at all.
And it's crazy, right? And I mean, I'll come back to something you said in a second, but the most interesting learning I had coming out of doing the stuff with millennials is that they're the same as we are.
Yeah, I know.
Like there might be some quick terms that are funny that are slightly different, but guess what? They want good service. They want to be taken care of. They want to make sure that they can interact the way they want to interact. They want us to figure out, or the industry to figure out, how do you take new players like Uber and Lyft and pull them into healthcare, or Blue Apron who can help with food, right? Like they're the same type of people that we are. There's really not much difference. But when we did the first panel, we went for an hour and a half. We had a ton of questions, a ton of audience involvement. And somebody came up to me after it was over and said, that was amazing. I wish it could have gone on for longer. I had so many questions. And
wow.
I said to her, honestly, like, my goal is that you now go do this yourself, right? Like, I'm happy to do this for you, even though that's not the business we're in. But like, you should go back to your company and hopefully be inspired enough to go do exactly what we just did here. Because everybody in healthcare is a consumer. But if I put healthcare people on that panel, they would not know how to answer the questions. It's an amazing phenomenon.
They completely
Can I tell you one funny story?
Please.
One funny story? Okay. So we do it one of the first times, and it's all health plans in the room. And the panel is, I always go for diversity in age, gender, income level. And we go through it about an hour and a half, and one of the people from one of the health plans raises their hands and says to this guy who is millennial, like double ear, like a lot of the stereotypes, and says, hey, I've just sat here and watched you beat up on us for the past hour and a half. Is there anything good that you can tell me about what we do? And the guy looks at him and goes, well, you're better than the DMV.
Yeah, set that bar really low. Wow. Better.
Yeah. And the one thing I just add to the conversation is we recruit for people who are outspoken, can be opinionated, but can also be somewhat entertaining. because we want people to be engaged in the panel. We don't want dry people who have tons of horrible healthcare stories only.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's
pay attention.
Casting is important. I mean, you're putting on a show. That's
Exactly.
true. So you have these panels and how, so I understand that you have the audience, that you, are there. How does this sort of end up getting into, help your brand, get customers?
So I think I mentioned before, our mission statement is helping people make smarter healthcare choices. And we're in a market, when your clients are health plans, there's not a lot of them in the country. There's roughly 505, I think. It was the last number I saw of health plans in the country. And most of them are really, really small. So you might end up where you have 200 real prospects and we already have 65 to 70 clients. So we do a lot of lead generation activity. Most of the leads we generate are new contacts within a client or an account that we're already working on. So for me, a lot of what I think my job is to provide real air cover for the sales team. So to do things that are different enough so that when a salesperson calls up one of these prospects and says, hey, I want to come talk to you, they say, oh, I just saw the panel that you guys just did, or I just read the article about the millennial panel, because that gives us, it sets us up with a little bit more thought leadership, but it's really around building the brand so that they feel comfortable in talking to us about doing business with us.
That's awesome. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk more about taking risks with your marketing activities. Hey, it's Drew. I wanted to use this break to ask you a single question. Are you a courageous marketer? Do you have the courage to go to your board of directors and say marketing could drive the growth of this company? We just need 3 times the budget. Do you have the courage to take the big idea that you already have and extend it internally and externally through influencers, through the media, through all of your content? If you're a courageous marketer but aren't sure how to roadmap all of this, I have a big idea for you. It's called Renegade Thinking. It's a program that we've developed and work with exclusively for B2B marketers, generally at large companies. And I want to give you my cell phone, 917-679-8852. Just text Renegade Thinking to 917-679-8852, and we can talk about how you can cut through. Okay, we're back, and my guest is Burt Rosen, the Chief Marketing Officer of HealthSparq. We just made an interesting comment about seeing your role as providing air cover for the sales team. That's a really, I've seen that. It's such an important thing. I immediately think of what the Aflac campaign did for those sales folks, because that's really what that program did. And I will explain that in very as short possible as I can. So the way that Aflac actually sells their products is they have to get companies to allow them to come in, and then they sell their supplemental insurance to the employees directly. It doesn't actually cost employees. So all they have to do is get the employer to say yes. So the air cover that was provided is this sort of, whoa, I've heard of Aflac and I like them, right? It's just as simple as that. And the guy walks in with the yellow duck and boom, next thing you know, he has an employee meeting. So providing air cover for a sales team makes a lot of sense. But it's also one of those areas that, sort of B2B marketers really often, struggle with, because they want to increasingly provide quality leads and be able to show that marketing is driving revenue. How do you sort of rationalize your investment and so forth? Do you have any sort of lead tracking or quality where you can sort of, besides anecdotes where one of the sales guys says, yeah, well, he said he saw your conference?
So it's a good question. I mean, we have, we use Salesforce, we use Marketo, so we have all the tracking of all the programs that we generally run. The brand activities are harder to quantify, so it is a lot more anecdotal. I'll give you an example. When we discussed What's the Fix in a few minutes, we had a few clients there, and one of my clients came up to me afterwards and said, being here made me proud to be your client. And yes, that's not scientific tracking, but, she was one of our biggest clients. So to get that kind of comment really reinforced some of the stuff that we're doing. So the brand stuff we're a small company, so I'm not doing, pre-program, post-program awareness studies. We don't do stuff like that because we're too small, and again, our market is fairly small. So it really is a lot of on the brand side is more of the anecdotal type stuff. And hopefully seeing it trickle through some of the other things. I think some of the things that we've tried to do with the panels and a lot of things is we've tried to bring the whole art of storytelling into the sale. And not just because storytelling is a trendy term right now, but again, because if we're in healthcare, right? So if I can sit at a sales meeting and say to a client, I just blew out my Achilles. Let me tell you how I did it. That's a much different conversation than saying, let me show you how the tool registers what you need and then how it returns your results. So, that air cover also helps kind of create a little bit more of a culture of storytelling too. So again, not a great answer.
It's okay. It's good. It's fine. And that answer works for me. You brought up storytelling. It is something that I've obsessed about for quite a while now. I want to understand what that means to you and what that means to the sales force.
Sure. So, the key word for me in what we do is relatability. Like that's one of the keys for me. And I just gave that example that if if we walk into a client and say, hey, let me just tell you a story about Margaret and Margaret's pregnancy and how she didn't necessarily know where to go. So she did these things and it helped her. And it's just a much different type of sell than it is me saying, let me show you how my provider finder and cost treatment tools work. So, when I'm in meetings, I often do it. And a lot of times I'll actually say to people, I'm not going to show you a slide, or I'll put up a slide that just is an image of a person on it. And I'll say, let's just talk about what this feels like for one of your health plan members in 2 years, 3 years, whatever the time horizon is, once this is implemented. And then I'll actually write a story about it. And I'll say, and I'll make it personal, right? Like so-and-so, if I was in Pennsylvania, so-and-so is a big Flyers and Phillies fan and, grew up in this kind of family. And then all of a sudden found out that she has to do these things. And now because she's able to do these things with you, she's able to achieve X, Y, Z. That's what we've been trying to instill a lot more in our sales team, and certainly on the marketing side, what we've been trying to do. A lot of our early collateral, we would actually write a story about what it would feel like for the person who's ultimately going to use this stuff.
Okay. And that's good. And it's sort of funny because we've been wrestling with this here. And I do a keynote on the sort of 7 reasons brands fail at storytelling. And so I would describe what you are talking about as little s storytelling. It's good stuff. It's personal stories that help, someone break the ice and get a conversation going. Sort of to me, big S storytelling is when the brand itself has this sort of overall conflict and overall story that the salespeople can then adopt. And so, one of the earlier podcasts was with Connie O'Brien, who and we talked about the friction campaign that we've actually helped them do. And in that, the salespeople suddenly become friction fighters. And so then when they tell the stories, each of the stories relates back to a particular issue of friction that they had. And it doesn't have to be about e-invoicing, but the story structure aligns with the brand story. And so that to me is sort of big S storytelling. Both are good. Both help deal with the relatability. So
I would say we probably end up in middle S. Because I think,
oh no, again, there's another S.
I want to break your paradigm.
Oh, stop. It took me so long to get to big S and little s, as opposed to BS, by the way.
Well, I was going to say the big S storytelling also sounds like that Kmart campaign from a while ago.
Yes, it does. And that was hilarious.
Yes, so that works well. But what I was going to say is that, right, again, I'm in healthcare. I challenge you to find one person who doesn't have a healthcare story.
Yeah.
So it is one of those industries that there's so many stories in it. So a lot of the way that we're using storytelling is how do we get people to start to be engaged in that so that they start to think about and articulate their own stories as we're talking about things. So slightly different than a brand story that drives it, like the friction stuff, but more about using storytelling as a way to form a more human connection and to be more relatable to what we do in an industry that should be highly, highly emotional and isn't.
Right. No, it's true. Okay. So let's spend a couple minutes on, this has been, by the way, incredibly informative, and on the What the Fix conference, and what that was all about and how did it involve risk taking?
This is my passion. So this is a passion project for me. So just to warn you about that. So let me give you the step before it. So, again, healthcare is insane. Right? You read stories every week about somebody who was charged $600 for a Band-Aid in a hospital, or somebody who was charged $40 for the nurse to hold their child. And you just read all these crazy stories. And we said, we want to start collecting these stories. So we started to run a program, which was a hashtag, What the Healthcare. And we would start to get people to post stories to What the Healthcare. We had a website, whatthehealthcare.info, that aggregated all the Twitter stuff. And we started to do that, and we got some decent traction on it, but not necessarily as much as we wanted. And then we sat back and we said, okay, let's think this through a little bit more. We don't just want to be the cranks of healthcare. Everybody knows it sucks, right? We don't want to just be the ones who are aggregating stories of how much it sucks. So we said, what can we do differently? And I had been in healthcare now for about 3.5 years and went to a lot of healthcare conferences early on. And the theme always somehow related to consumerism at these conferences. And what you would find is you'd go to the conference and you'd never actually see a normal consumer, right? Back to the panel conversation. And hopefully this isn't offensive, and I apologize if it is, but what I found at these conferences is they're all old white guys talking to old white guys about making change in the industry that all the old white guys created. And I mean, back to that echo chamber comment before, it really is an echo chamber. It's just people talking to each other about stuff that's never going to happen. So I said, what if we actually flipped the model? And what if instead of the industry hearing from the industry, what if the industry hears from people, and people who have overcome healthcare obstacles despite the system, not because of it, and then have driven change as a result? And that was like that's the elevator pitch. And that was the start of What's the Fix. And it's actually What's the Fix with an S on the end of the what, but and a question mark. And the site for that is what'sthefix.info. And it's also hashtag WTFix. And the risk for me is I didn't know if anybody would care. So I've never done this before. I'd never put on a conference like this before. So I started reaching out to people and found amazing stories. Like I found a story of a woman who was a type 1 diabetic who hacked her own artificial pancreas and built it open source so anyone could do it. And
Whoa.
So the FDA. I found another story of a father and a mother whose son had severe epilepsy, over 200 seizures a day. And they read about treatment with CBD, but it was illegal in the U.S. So they went to Great Britain and et cetera, treated him with CBD, ultimately got his seizures down to under 10 a day, and it's now in clinical trials in the U.S. So I looked for stories of people who drove the change instead of the industry driving change. So again, I had no idea what to expect. I didn't budget for going into the year because the idea came up to me in the middle of the year. So I pulled the money out of the marketing budget. We kept it pretty much on a shoestring. And we were pretty successful. I mean, we had 650 people register for it. One of the keys for me was that I didn't want it to be in the room, like in person only. So we streamed all of it and paid a lot of attention to the online audience. Had about 530 people register for the online and roughly 400 people stay with us for over an hour. We trended on Twitter. We had 2,700 tweets, and it was actually really successful. And now we're working on the next one. But back to the storytelling conversation before, we did it. The business objective for me was that I want HealthSparq to be associated with the concept of a company in healthcare that actually cares about people and puts people first. The other side of it is that I want HealthSparq to be associated with trying to help change healthcare for the better. So that's really what What's the Fix is. I could go on and on about this one for hours.
No, it's a great
for me, and I won't.
No, that's a really interesting program. And what I like about it, and I'm going to use this as sort of the way to wrap up this episode, everything starts with the positioning of the brand, helping people make smarter healthcare choices. And so making people smarter, it's like anything that you did that made people smarter about healthcare was good. Now, if you could really take that up to a level like you did with What the Fix and show how people were doing this on their own as opposed to how the industry was doing it, you almost shame the industry in some ways. And being the folks that shame the industry, it suddenly made you and your organization a consumer and the Ralph Nader of healthcare, which is a fascinating position for a brand that's in the industry to take. It's like, guys, we're not doing this right. We could certainly do it better. Look at how the consumers are coming up with their own hacks. So, I get it. I see why that, was so successful. This is something that I do at the end of every episode is I try to bring some closure to the conversation and some notes for all of us students of marketing to think about. So, step number 1 was redefining the story, or the brand. Step number 2 was doing research to make sure that it was accurate and that you could, bring this thing, to life. Then the interesting part to me as you started to create content, a lot of this was face to face. And I think that's a really important part of what you did. And even though, both of us have spent a lot of time in digital marketing, your instinct was we got to get people talking to people about these issues. And so getting real people, as opposed to the usual experts was break number one. And then when you took that even to a higher level with the conference, it made a sense. One of the things that you said really quickly that I think is really important here is when you're creating content, I don't care whether it's an event or a podcast like this one, you better be thinking in terms of all the things that you could do with the content. Burt mentioned blog content that came out of it, LinkedIn content, social content. He talked about live streaming the event because it's expensive to create the initial thing, but the iterations are where you get the broadest exposure. Finally, then we get to sort of this notion of metrics, and Burt's in a B2B category. He knows it's 650, I think, or the ultimate number of prospects. So it becomes a very focused program where you can track both current customers and as well as prospects, and sort of build, on an account-based level, really sort of the list. I thought another thing that he said that was really important in all of this is one way you're on the right track is if your customers feel good about it. Oftentimes marketers will say something that doesn't feel right to the customers, and or doesn't feel right to the employees, and then you have this disconnect, and then it becomes sort of vaporware. It's just marketing. It's not sort of a brand truth. So, oh my God, there was just sort of an amazing conversation that we had in terms of how to build a program, how to look at a category and bring some freshness to it. So kudos to you, Burt. It seems like things are off to a good start. What's next as you look ahead?
Good question. So what's next is the next version of What's the Fix, which is going to take place this year in May. It's going to be it has potential to be much bigger than it was last year. Last year, I think, like I mentioned, because it was a huge risk, I did it like I found space that was no charge for the space and stuff like that. And we wanted to prove the concept. And this year we actually have a partner that we're still working to make. It's not public yet, but we're working on a partnership that could actually make this much bigger and expose a lot of other audiences to it. And that's one of the big ones for us. I mean, that's we kind of felt like we hit a nerve. And I think, back to one of the things you just said, it's really, ideally, right? Like your clients love your company because of the tools or the products you're selling them. Sometimes having them be exposed to things that you believe that aren't as directly related can be hugely valuable, right? So that's one of the things that I loved about What's the Fix from the client perspective is that it's not what we do every day with them, and it's not what they do every day. So if we could expose them to different types of thinking in healthcare, they respond really well and they love it. And to be the company that can bring that to them, I think is important. The one last thing I'd want to say quickly, even though you asked me what's next, but most of these things we do on very, very small budgets. So, when I talk about rebranding, again, I'm a pretty small company, so I don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to go build a whole new brand out of it. So a lot of times I think there's a lot of things that you can do that you don't have to invest a ton of money into it, but you could still get a lot of great results out. And the rebranding actually has now driven everything we've done. So it's made a huge difference. So hopefully that at least helped a little bit with the what's next question and some bonus thoughts.
No, it's great. And so with that, I want to thank you for being on the show. I want to thank my listeners for sticking with us here. And to the listeners, just a reminder, if you enjoyed this episode, feel free to share with a friend. If you're not yet a subscriber, there's a lot more episodes in the pipeline. So please go to your favorite podcast channel and subscribe. Burt, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Drew. It's been fun.
And for the listeners, as always, keep those Renegade Thinking caps on and strong.
This has been Renegade Thinkers Unite, but it doesn't end there. Just go to renegadethinkersunite.com for more and subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode. We'll talk with you next time on Renegade Thinkers Unite.